Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. Each week, we meet here in the UploadVR studios to discuss the next generation of personal computing. My name is Ian Hamilton, and I'm in the United States, joined by David Heaney from Northern Ireland. VR brings us together into this broadcast studio where we've got cameras, a TV, and tablets in front of us for notes and comments from our live YouTube audience. We syndicate VR Download out to all podcast platforms and encourage our audience to become UploadVR members. This week, we're sponsored by Veil VR. Veil VR is a 5v5 tactical shooter that was just released on Steam in early access. With very positive reviews, fans of Veil VR are praising its design for details aimed at hyper realism. Fans note its weapon handling, from reloading to cycling the actions of various firearms. And of course, you can use cover to lean around corners and line up shots, or you could simply pick up semi used magazines for ammo conservation. Check it out now on Steam. We've got a link in this video's description. I also want to say thank you to our Upload VR YouTube members: John Westra, Dunadim, Smashed Reality, Robert, 360 Pickleball, Rick Tet, Sexy Bicycle, Skiva, Andrew, Handy, Clay, ACP, Marcellus, Ryan, Mark, Joseph, Gravity, Joe, Quentin, Andrew, Andrew Tech, King Jellyfish, Hone Glenn, The Lucky Dogs Band, Aaron Prindle, Captain Clutch, James at Loud, Lazarus, Anthony Mann, Mark, Anthony Meal, and I'll need to update that. We've also got our latest members, Indie Soul and Shola Loves Games. Thank you so much for joining up and supporting us. David, what do we have today?
So a slightly slower news week this week, but still some pretty interesting topics to talk about here. We'll talk about MetaQuest Move Fitness statistics now syncing to Android Health Connect, not just iPhones. Unity's new XR Hands package, which adds hand tracking via OpenXR. Mojo Vision ceasing work on its smart contact lens, which may seem science fiction, but was actually a real thing. The US Army contracting Microsoft to build a new and improved model of the militarized HoloLens after the current model failed some of its field testing. And finally, Ian's impressions of the Tilt 5 tabletop AR system. So that'll be a really interesting one at the end. That's our last kind of major CES coverage there.
Yeah, I'm working on another one right now about HoloRide, because the HoloRide was cool as well, but a very different sort of demo from what I saw from Tilt 5. Excited to get into that. Our commenters sort of roasting me by my tendency to call you by your last name, so I will challenge myself to try to keep them all sober out there from their drinking games that they've got going if I say your last name.
Yeah, it was an interesting scenario because when I first started, we had two Davids on staff, so it made sense to find a different way to call one of us. And then now we have a Heaney, Henry, and Harry, so it now makes kind of sense to go back to David. So it's just kind of a funny coincidence of a situation there that means that's where we are now.
Yeah, so I see Stephanie there in our comments, and I see Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop. I believe Stephanie is with Tilt 5. If you have any specific questions about Tilt 5 now or when we get to them, you've got, I think, a representative there who you might want to put specific questions to for things that we might not cover in my sort of meet and greet I did with Jerry in Las Vegas to check out the consumer kit that they've put together. Let's talk about that first subject here. MetaQuest Move fitness stats can now sync to Android Health Connect. Apple Health syncing was added last year. What does this mean, Heaney, and how does this sort of fit into people's routine?
Yeah, so this Quest Move, if you don't know what it is, used to be called Oculus Move, is just the Quest's built-in fitness tracking system. So it tracks the estimated calories burned, the amount of move minutes you've done, so the amount of time you've exercised. And last year, they added a way to sync that to Apple Health if you've got an iPhone, but obviously Android users were left out. So now they have added the ability to sync it through Android Health Connect. And the reason they do that through that sort of pipeline app that connects these different various Android systems is just because there are so many different health solutions on Android. The majority of people, if you're on iPhone, are going to tend to be using Apple Health, and that's what all of those iPhone apps tend to hook into. But if you've got a Samsung phone, you might be using Samsung's fitness service. If you've got Google, you might be using Google Fit. You know, there's also a Fitbit service, which obviously Google bought, but is still kind of its separate thing. And there are other ones like Withings. So that Android Health Connect app lets you bring that all together in one place. And the advantage is then any workout you're doing in VR, be it in a dedicated workout app like Supernatural or FitXR, or even just in something like Beat Saber, or even if you're playing something like Blade and Sorcery Nomad and you happen to be slashing very hard and end up burning calories, then it's all integrated into that one place. It's no longer something you would have to count separately.
Yeah, closing your rings over on the Apple Health app is a big thing for a lot of people. It's kind of without it, you're not going to even consider using some of these devices. So I deeper integration across all these platforms is going to be important going forward.
Yeah, this sort of fitness use case, we've said this so many times in the show, it's almost a meme and a trope, but I personally have been completely surprised by this happening in the past few years. I don't think if you'd asked anyone when the Oculus Quest was announced what will be one of the main use cases of this half a kilogram brick you strap to your face would be high intensity fitness. But it's something that's just so compelling. And these apps like Supernatural and FitXR and Les Mills Body Combat have just kind of drilled down so well on what people are looking for a home workout that it has been one of those use cases that is huge. So, I mean, you'd have to kind of be very bullish on this in the future. If we get headsets in 3 or 4 or 5 years that are like 200 grams and really kind of lightweight and breathable, this could be a really huge use case. This could be one of those things that ends up being a major percentage of VR usage over time.
I really do think that, and it was what I loved getting into with asking those representatives from Supernatural. There was the Leanne, the fitness coach, as well as the super fan, and I asked them that question of just how big do you think VR fitness could get, and you know they had to choose their words carefully, and it seemed like they both believed in the long-term idea, but like it's hard to imagine even as it transforms some people's lives that it would become a bigger activity than physical gym going, right? Like that's a big business with multiple locations in every city across America, as well as in major cities throughout the world. So I keep thinking of VR as simulation for things like that, physical locations and how they compare. Mini golf being the thing I come back to again and again. Gyms are another one that's hard to crack, but just the freedom of being able to do it at home without judgment is a big deal that could potentially make the market bigger, I would think.
Yeah, and the upcoming future technologies for headsets are just going to make this more compelling. So, someone in our comments pointing out mixed reality will obviously be a huge thing when you can be in your same room and you use a workout mat without having to kind of guess where it is. Body tracking, that's going to be huge because then you're going to be able to get form recommendations for body weight exercises. We were talking last week about how eventually we'd love to see mixed reality headsets be able to track real world objects. So maybe in 5 or 10 years, you can just instantly pick up a dumbbell or any other kind of weightlifting instrument and have the headset track it in, scan it in, tell you your form, tell you what to do. And with mixed reality, you're going to have that trainer just sitting in your real room with you. And yeah, James O'Loughlin saying that they thought it was obvious that fitness would always be a big use case of XR. To be clear, I thought it would happen eventually. I'm just saying I didn't think it would happen with headsets being this heavy and bulky in this early years of VR.
Yeah, I think a lot about Beat Saber being this, like people being surprised that Beat Saber is big, and it's like, are you surprised dancing is a big human activity? Like, no, it goes hand in hand, and then just all the physical activities you can do. We were just talking about the bike last week, right? Like being able to bike along a path in VR is a fantastic feeling. If you've got the mapping and the sort of content to back that up. I think we're ready to move on to the next subject here. Any specific comments you want to get into?
Yeah, the only last thing I was going to say on that dancing is I always find it amazing how many people are actually clubbing in VR chat. On a Saturday night and Friday night, it's actually remarkable how many people are legitimately getting drunk at home and spending time with strangers in the same way that people would in a real club. And, that's going to be burning calories as well.
Yeah, I that's a great point. And I think a lot of those comparisons get really interesting. And, for every article that's like VR is dead, I would love to see an article that says 11 VR table tennis is arguably the world's largest table tennis club, or that VR chat is the world's largest dance club. If you start talking about the simultaneous users in there, it's not it's not the same thing as like how many servers do I have for my multiplayer shooting game. It's how many people are in this like one location doing stuff. And yeah, the servers could be limited to 20 people per server potentially, but it's still it becomes a very, very interesting comparison if you think like 11 table tennis, for instance. You could get endless matches really quickly with people who are your ranking, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, I'd love to see esports for those sort of very physical VR games emerge. I'd love to see, a walkabout mini golf tournament. I'd love to see an 11
Yeah,
table
I think
tennis
I
tournament.
think it's happening, right? We're gonna have to. We should talk. I've seen people in our comments talk about it or joke about it. We really should talk to these folks about seeing if we can organize some kind of like I don't know, some kind of play together thing where it's just fun for us all to play and try different things. And speaking of that, did you see the Golf Plus news? I don't remember if we talked about it on this podcast, but the Golf Plus thing is just phenomenal.
Oh yeah, that is incredible what they've been able to do with that new partnership.
Yeah. So if we need to refresh anyone who's watching this week on what that is, we can get into it, but I don't think we need to cover it
So
again.
the only last comments I bring up here is people are bringing up Peloton as a perfect example of how, fitness from home can be this huge market. And with VR and mixed reality headsets, instead of it being this multi-$1,000 equipment you're buying to do one specific task, you're going to have this headset that can do all of these other things and fitness. So yeah, I think the future of mixed reality and virtual reality fitness is very bright.
Indy saying, does multiplayer exercise so you can challenge your friends' exercise outcomes, does that exist in these fitness VR programs yet? That's a good question. I know that exists in some form on the watch side of things, if you get the data into the Apple ecosystem. But and I know there's certain head-to-head courses, but like overall fitness outcomes is an area I haven't really seen them touch. Um, all right, Unity's new XR Hands package lets developers add OpenXR hand tracking instead of headset-specific SDKs. This is a rather big deal in terms of multi-platform support for hand tracking-based apps, right? Controllers was a long time coming. Now you're saying hands are a big part of this, right, Heaney?
Yeah, so the caveat I would add here is that this is in preview. This is only
Everybody
just
take a drink. Sorry.
what was the first?
I
Oh,
said
the caveat.
Heaney.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't even notice this time. But yeah, so this is something that is in preview. It is very early. It currently only supports Quest and HoloLens, but it builds a foundation that means that in future, developers will no longer have to integrate these headset specific packages. And let's just call out the elephant in the room. We're talking obviously about the Oculus Unity integration package, which was previously the only proper way to add support for controller free hand tracking on Quest. The problem is that while the Oculus integration is OpenXR these days, we were told by a Unity staffer that it actually uses a proprietary OpenXR extension and a non-standard hand joint bone arrangement. By it there, to be clear, I mean the Oculus integration. So this new package is called XR Hands, and it's from Unity. It uses the standard Unity XR subsystem and OpenXR. So it's completely following all of those standards. In future, they hope that other headset makers like HTC and Pico, et cetera, can leverage this system so that this is all just something supported by developers without having to go through all these separate packages. OpenXR is one of those things that, it's out and it's being used, but the ideal of OpenXR, where developers just write one piece of code and it runs everywhere, is not currently the reality of OpenXR. We are still in the early days of these companies transitioning from proprietary SDKs to the OpenXR standard. And we're still in that kind of messy middle era where people are using a standard OpenXR, but with proprietary extensions and proprietary implementations. So, by the end of this decade, I'm very confident in saying that all this is going to be sorted out and everything's going to be OpenXR. But this is one small step towards that goal, that ideal situation.
Yeah, I think we talked about this previously where the current headset, even the Quest right now, doesn't really expect you to be using hands as the default input, and that's an understandable, I guess, because they come with controllers by default. Of course, they would expect that, but I want that option, and I kind of wanted it yesterday to be kind of like be able to turn the headset on with just my hand tracking and sort of that go down that path.
Yeah, it's really weird how on Quest today, if you pick up the Quest and start using hand tracking, you'll get these blaring notifications about controllers can't be tracked and controllers aren't charging, or I'm not trying to use the controllers. I'm sitting here using hand tracking. Why are you giving me all of these notifications about my controllers? As you say, this is still a controller centric system. That makes sense because the quality of hand tracking, although the software has improved and minorly with Quest Pro, the hardware has improved, it's still far off what you would get in a depth sensor system like Ultraleap. And, we still have yet to see a headset from Meta that is really designed from the ground up for hand tracking.
Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, saying, I'm working on integrating OpenXR hand tracking, and oh boy, it is such a mess. I feel for you. Any other comments you want to respond to before we move on to the next one?
Just James O'Loughlin agreeing that it's very annoying how the Quest kind of irritates you about controllers when you're using your hands.
Yep. So, yeah, the back Indie Soul making the Back to the Future reference. You mean you have to use your hands? That's a game for kids. I love that quote. All right. So, Mojo Vision is ceasing work on its smart contact lens. Was it too ahead of its time? And do you remember how much money they raised, David?
I don't have that information on me. I just have the kind of the technical info in the timeline here. You can certainly look that up. But for anyone who wasn't familiar with this was not just a CGI rendering. This was an actual real prototype device. It was announced in early 2020, and it has a tiny micro LED display, ARM processor, IMU, that means accelerometer and gyroscope in one tiny chip, wireless radio, a micro battery, and other components like a power management system, all integrated in a contact lens. I actually saw this in real life. I just saw it being held in someone's hand, a prototype, and it is real. It is not fake. They were kind of demonstrating it by showing the output on a display. To be clear, most of the computational processing would be done by an external device like a smartphone or a compute box and streamed to it. But this really was a device that was capable of powering itself. And last year, the CEO of the company actually became the first person to put it in his eye. So beforehand, this was just something that's being demonstrated in people's hands, but he actually really did put it in his eye and check that it worked, and it worked. But unfortunately, the news now is that due to, and I'm quoting him here, significant challenges in raising capital, they will no longer be able to afford, Perkins says, to develop Mojo Lens. And they are now instead going to lay off approximately 75% of the company and focus on their micro LED display. Because in the process of building this contact lens, they had to actually develop what they claim is the smallest and densest display ever made at a staggering 14,000 pixels per inch. So given that all the big companies from Sony to Samsung to Apple to Meta to all of these big companies are currently researching micro LED displays, micro LED being the true next generation display system after LCD and OLED, and they're all trying to figure out how to mass manufacture it affordably, and they're all trying to use it for AR glasses as well. Mojo's decided, why don't we take this expertise we've built up in the process and focus our company entirely on that micro LED display?
Yeah, any comments you want to get to there? I wanted to ask that question about funding raised because I looked it up and I believe it's around 200 million according to Crunchbase, a little bit over 200 million that was put into this effort as early as late as last year. And basically, as I understand startups to go, you when you do a funding round, you expect it to last about 18 months. And as I don't know, I've seen a lot of startups run out of it before 18 months, even though they try to target that. I just wanted to have that scale there relative to efforts like Magic Leap, which is raised on the order of $2 billion, And I just wanted to make sure that was part of our conversation here before we move on to the last few subjects of our discussion today.
So the last thing I would point out here is, someone saying contact lenses AR no more, and a lot of the public reporting was calling this AR, but to be clear, it wasn't actually augmented reality in the sense that there was not positional tracking here. It was not, meshing out your room and putting virtual objects on your table. This was a heads-up display. It was rotational in that you rotate your head and it would stay in place. But it's a heads-up display in the same sense that we expect smart glasses from companies like Meta in the next few years to be heads-up display. Glasses that are not AR, they don't put objects in your real space, but that act more like Google Glass, but without the really ugly tech frame that was on the side of Google Glass. A normal pair of glasses that gives you a contextual heads-up display. Mojo Vision's pitch was essentially, we're going to give you that, but in a contact lens instead. I expect this will come back in the 2030s or maybe even later this decade, but I do think, to quote the question you asked at the start, it was probably just a bit too ahead of its time.
Yeah. Andrew Tech asking, do we have reason to believe it worked?
Yeah, so there were demonstrations done for people where you had the product hooked up and you were seeing a display output. It's possible they could have faked that, but it seems very unlikely. And the CEO kind of demonstrated putting it in his eye. Again, obviously, there's a point at which if we don't put it on our own eye, we can't 100% tell you it worked. But I do think it did. The question is, at what cost? I imagine the components and the miniaturization here would have made the product quite expensive in the end if it had panned out.
Yeah, I very excited to get to the last two subjects we've got to cover here today. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Veil VR. Veil VR is a 5v5 tactical shooter game developed from the ground up for virtual reality. Wait, I have an image to show, or I have a video to show here. Here we go. Yeah, this might just be the next big VR shooter. You can check out Veil VR on Steam. And it is just in early access right now. Fans are giving it very positive reviews. They're praising the full body avatars, gameplay, and physics. Developers are constantly responding to community feedback, and there's an active Discord group. We've got the link to that in our description as well, where you can connect with the Veil VR community. All right, let's get back to chat here. Yeah, when we talk about whether things actually work in demos from CES, we try to be as explicit as possible about the actual nature of the demos that were given. I could totally understand any number of people that went to that Pimax demo and didn't notice that they weren't touching the controllers that fit into the sleeve. Like the controllers that you're holding, the 6-DoF ones, look like the things that they show in the promo videos, but they're not. They're different, and you could be easily. Those sorts of things happen all the time at CES, and it's really easy to miss it. But we don't have any reason to think it wasn't like functional in the sense that like it worked on paper, right? Like a lot of these things, like having that thing in your eye for 4 hours or 6 hours is an entirely different thing than the CEO saying that they actually wore it.
Yeah, and to be clear, they posted a video, so whether that was functional or not, it was in his eye. But another question another thing I'd always point out is people focus a little bit too much, I think, on whether a prototype works. It's actually relatively, and I really want to focus on that word relatively in case anyone gets the wrong idea here, easy to make a prototype of a technology product. It's a lot harder to find a way to affordably mass produce it and actually make some sort of margin off that.
All right, well, let's move on to this next subject because this is kind of like the AR special episode, I think, for our show here. Because first we've talked about contact lenses that are just heads-up displays, right? They're not quite anywhere near that path of doing what we really want AR to do. Now we're going to we could think of as the ultra high-end, most life-critical use case for augmented reality imaginable. Outfitting the U.S. Army with ruggedized HoloLens technology. So, Heaney, you've been following this closely. Darn it, David, you've been following this really, really closely. I'm just gonna have to go back and correct myself a million times. David, you've been following this for years, and you pay really, really particular close attention to the type of technology they use. When you wrote this story, you described some of the use cases, and I don't think people really grasp, that they were actually talking about doing some of these things with this hardware. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so first of all, some of our commenters are going to be horrendously drunk if this drinking game really is happening. So sorry. So this is called HoloLens IVAS, and this is, as far as I'm aware, the highest end see-through AR display system that's available anywhere in any actual real use case. It's a it's essentially a HoloLens 2 on steroids, souped up with a bunch of extra sensors and a completely different optical system that has a much wider field of view. Some of the reports have indicated it's around 80 degrees horizontal, which is truly stunning for a see-through AR system. And the US Army had already kind of got an order in of 5,000 of these units for this contract that could be worth billions over the next 10 years, many, many billions. But field testing had been showing issues that they were trying to solve, and they had hoped that the most recent field testing that was being presented to the US Congress, which makes the procurement decisions for the US military, would be positive, but it was not. And it showed issues that were mission affecting physical impairments, including headaches, eye strain, nausea, and reliability issues with essential functions failing. Some of the other tests also showed an issue where if you've ever seen any of these see-through AR systems, you'll notice that as an outside observer, you can actually notice the light in the eye of the person. So if you were in a combat situation in darkness and you're the enemy, you can actually notice the kind of light reflecting from their AR visor, which is obviously terrible for any kind of stealth. So there were all kinds of issues, and Congress has basically blocked the next $500 million order of 6,900 units that the Army was hoping to procure. The initial 5,000 batch will still go forward, but it will be used for training. And in response to this, the US Army has awarded Microsoft a $125 million contract for a new 1.2 version, which should have a lower profile heads up display with a distributed counterweight for improved user interface and comfort, as well as significant software changes that should significantly improve the reliability and reduce the power draw. Because you can kind of see here where the power pack went to that had to run this thing. And obviously, the heavier that is, the more burden on the soldier, the less they can carry in terms of other useful supplies for military operations. So it'll be interesting to see, will this continue to be, as some people would describe, a kind of boondoggle where these technical issues just pile up and it never gets ready for deployment? Or will they actually get it resolved? Because the US Army has indicated that, their optimistic hope here is that every soldier eventually, say by the next decade, is outfitted with these. And, Ian was talking about what are the actual use cases. It's giving you the situational awareness that you would get in a video game in real life. So you look around and you see blue dots over all of your friendly units. You look up into the sky and you see, a blue icon on friendly aircraft. You see a red icon on enemy aircraft. When it detects an enemy in the distance that you haven't noticed, it kind of tracks them out. If your commander sets an objective on a map, that will be translated into 3D space in the headset, and you see that. It just transforms spatial awareness. And there are some other really interesting use cases. The US Army is actually trying to do this system called the soldier-borne sensor, where some soldiers are given a personal drone that they can clip to themselves and send out for tactical reconnaissance. And this headset could show a picture-in-picture view of what that drone was seeing. So there are just a variety of use cases for giving soldiers augmented reality, but the reality is that getting this to work in a way that doesn't, cause so much of a hassle and burden that it actually causes more issues than it's worth is proving to be a lot harder and a lot costlier than people thought.
Yeah, I can't even sort of wrap my head around all of the considerations that military personnel would have to consider in assessing this sort of device in the field. Ruggedized doesn't even begin. You're talking about, generally in like other headsets, a single particle of sand causing you a huge nightmare in your optics, needing to operate in conditions ranging from hyper cold to super hot, and they have to figure out how, talking about the light being visible from far away. I think about heat. If it's extraordinarily hot as well, that's also giving away something you wouldn't normally give away without that sort of eyewear on your head. And I see, sadly, it's Bradley in our comments. Thank you for joining our show today. Talking about what you were talking about, Heaney, about whether this might not actually get off the ground. Um, there was one thought I loved there was something you said there back a little bit that it was an all-time like great quote from our show. You talked about the situational awareness of a video game coming to soldiers on the field. That's a remarkably concise way of describing the capabilities this device brings to the table, and it's a little scary to consider the effectiveness that might change in battle, given that as a tool set. So it's definitely something we need to be cognizant of as we move into the next steps of AR and VR. But what is the field of view? I want to get that out of you, Henia, here on the record.
Yeah, so the reported field of view of this system is 80 degrees horizontal by 40 vertical. So again, that would be beyond anything else that we've seen from see-through headsets. And when I say see-through, I'm talking about a device that gives you a transparent optic, so you see directly real light from the real world, as opposed to a pass-through headset like Quest Pro or Vive XR Elite, where cameras pass through the real world display onto a display panel that is then magnified by a lens to your face. So this is a see-through headset. And I think, as we've said many times in this show, the reason you can't use a pass-through headset in environments like this, or in any safety critical environment, is because if it fails, it lags, it freezes, or it turns off, you're in complete blackness. You are just completely blinded. So you do need a see-through optic here.
Yeah, but I think about the moment before you leave, like whatever your the moment before you leave your vehicle. There's uh, there's a certain value to you throw up the drone and it maps the whole area. Being able to sort of get that situational awareness in a VR headset before being out in the field, I think about that as a trade-off as well, like of technically speaking, like what is the advantage of sort of being in a armored vehicle near the scene, able to take that headset off and then run out with your normal gear? Is there value in VR being on the battlefield or in a operational area compared to the see-through optics? Because, like as you said, if it goes out, if it runs out of power, you're in trouble in a VR headset.
Yeah, I've seen some militaries prototype the idea of using tanks wherein the tank operators are wearing a VR headset so that they can kind of look around and see through the tank as if they were in a completely invisible tank. And obviously, that's something that massively changes situational awareness, because if you're in a tank, and especially if you're in a close quarters environment like urban environments, you really have terrible visibility around you. And so if you had this thing covered in cameras and you did get this see-through ability, that's a game changer. Again, I still think because of those issues inherent to pass-through headsets, there's going to be a lot of resistance to that, and you could get something that is somewhat similar, even just through a see-through headset, displaying a kind of heads-up panel. And here is that image of the HoloLens IVAS compared to HoloLens 2 and Magic Leap 1. Unfortunately, I don't have a comparison here to Magic Leap 2, but Magic Leap 2's field of view improvements were almost all in the vertical space. So even if Magic Leap 2 is kind of competitive vertically with the HoloLens militarized version, when it comes to the width, that 80 degrees width, there is no deployed headset I've heard of that is see-through that gets to that field of view.
Yeah, so this is a good image to have on screen as we begin our transition to talking about Tilt 5. And do ask any questions you have about AR, VR, of course, because that's our normal subject, but this is everything AR, it seems, this episode. But yeah, we do have Stephanie, I think, from Tilt 5 in our comments to talk about specific questions about Tilt 5. Yeah, I saw Magic Leap 2 at CES, and yeah, I saw the vertical field of view, and I feel like it was pretty impressive. And exactly like we've been saying, that vertical field of view matters quite a bit. But I only got a couple demos in that headset. It wasn't a lot of time, and I there were distracting visual artifacts in that demo, like physical hardware things I was seeing, and that didn't have enough demo time to really assess exactly what was wrong with my particular demo. They invited me to come back the next day, and I couldn't schedule it. Um, but like, I've got to give that context from having seen that at CES, in addition to us talking about a use case for augmented reality that is literally life or death. And you've got a field of view that is still pretty small. What did you pull up there, David? You're muted, I think, or
Yeah, so this is just a another field of view chart that shows you that vertical field of view improvement that Magic Leap 2 focused on. So they've kind of gone the opposite direction as the militarized HoloLens. And for comparison, you also see a pass-through headset that doesn't actually have a remarkable field of view compared to other opaque headsets. Lynx R1, which is obviously that upcoming French pass-through headset, and the likes of Quest Pro actually has a wider field of view than Lynx R1. So you just see that there is still a massive advantage from field of view perspective to pass-through headsets.
yeah. Indie Soul saying good AR is still a long ways away, sadly, and that is the perfect note to transition to talking about Tilt 5. So, Tilt 5 is continuing to deliver incremental improvements to its system, and the ultimate question in my head is how far can they take AR gaming? Um, We've seen Tilt 5 over the years. I got to see Cast AR myself back at GDC years ago. Talked to Jerry Ellsworth, the CEO and founder over there, several times, multiple times over the years at various points in their evolution. Um, I I expressed this in my piece. There's a story in Jerry Ellsworth's work that continues from Valve to a startup called Cast AR and now to Tilt 5. It's the same fundamental technology idea that has been honed over the last decade, almost the last decade to the month, February, I think. I put the tweet where Jerry Ellsworth was fired from Valve in my article. I believe it was February 2013. And 10 years later, that same technology, she bought it out of Valve, went and tried this Cast AR startup that was kickstarted within a year or so of the original Oculus Kickstarter. And that startup tried to promise too much. It made some mistakes. When I've talked to Jerry Ellsworth in the past, she has owned those mistakes, talked about them, their learning experiences. That device tried to do too much. They tried to make it do too much too early. And critically, as I remember, they paid back, they refunded the backers when they couldn't deliver. And that was a pretty critical choice in continuing this technology into a new iteration. And here we are with Tilt 5, and we've been following Tilt 5 for a couple of years now. They also kickstarted this project, and that was at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, all this context I have to get across here because according to Tilt 5, according to everyone there, they have fulfilled their Kickstarter backers. They have gotten this kit out to all of the people who backed them despite the COVID-19 pandemic, right? I have to just lay that out there as an incredible achievement to have gotten there that far. Now, you put that in context with some of the earlier things we discussed in this podcast, Mojo Vision closing up because they can't raise capital. Magic Leap going back to COVID and during this whole process could not raise enough money despite having raised $2 billion for a complete AR system. There's still a version of Magic Leap selling. They did go and finish new hardware. They are still presenting and have business customers buying their system, but it's still an expensive enterprise, and getting more money is not easy. We're entering a new phase in the economy, and another thing. So this is all the context I want to give. I also want to now give my sort of hands-on what I experienced at CS. But is there any comments you want to get to, or any comments you want to get before I get into that?
No, I think we have time for that. Just some people kind of clarifying there that it is possible to use multiple glasses on one PC. This no longer requires multiple PCs for each pair of glasses. That's correct? Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Let me see if I can find the image of what I saw here, because that is critical. That is absolutely critical. Our tweet out where I announced this article, I mentioned that it could be used with two glasses, and I felt bad because that didn't make clear that you could actually use it up to four pairs of glasses from a single PC. What I actually saw in my demo was two from a single PC. I'm not finding the image in our library here. There it is. Okay. So, um, most demos at CES, the Magic Leap demo was done at a booth. They paid for booth space. I would guess they paid for booth space, a very large booth. They had one of the largest booths at CES in the VR AR area. So that would have been a high cost expense to, demonstrate to all the people there, this is what our AR platform is capable of. That's the standard way of going to CES, right? You pay for some kind of exhibition space, and a whole bunch of journalists and industry representatives, suppliers come walking by to see what you're doing, and you make connections or customers that way. This is not what Tilt 5 was doing at CES. I met Jerry in a casino lobby, like a lobby of a hotel at the Aria. She's carrying the Tilt 5 consumer packaging for this headset under one arm. She's got a carry-on, like a rolling bag, with her other hand. And on her back, she's got slung a tube, like you would carry a painting or something or a poster in a tube, and she's walking around. This is Tilt 5's presence, as I understand it, at CES 2023. So this is a literally bootstrap type situation, like not literally bootstrap. It's just a not a costly outlay of, in comparison to what Magic Leap is doing. This is like a mode of startup founder CEO that is in a mode of trying to take meetings and find runway. That's the way I interpret that. You're taking meetings, giving a demo, and do you want to talk about a term sheet? That's how I would imagine Jerry Ellsworth spent a fair amount of her time at CS. I was one of those meetings. I got to do this demo, right? And we walk over, we look for a table. We talked for a long time, then we go and try to find a table where she can roll out this mat. So the thing that's slung on her back is a tube carrying this mat. So this is a fan-made mat. It's not the mat that the board that's included with the consumer packaging box. She opens up the tube, rolls this out on the table, and then grabs her laptop, connects two glasses to the laptop, hands me a wand. She takes a wand and starts booting up game after game on her laptop. It was... I've tried to describe everything that was involved in giving me that demo, right? Because after 10 years of VR demos yes, some of them came from laptops. Some of them worked well. All of them were lonely. I was a single person in a headset. I did not have anyone in the headset with me when it's offered in this sort of like conference setting. So one of the first parts of the demo, I've got the glasses on. Everything on the board is super bright. There's a scene of a game that she says isn't coming soon. I noticed Stephanie in our comments saying there's multiple games coming soon to the platform. Catan is one of the games that they've worked out a deal with to bring to the Tilt 5 AR gaming platform. I'm not allowed to say yet. I'm under embargo basically on whatever on the game I saw. But she was explaining me the rules of the game. I hadn't actually played it before. And she leans over. So she's sitting over here. I'm sitting right here. And she leans over and points to a card that's sitting in front of me. Now, I can point over and see Heaney's comments going on his tablet. And uh, I can point to them or point to his apps on his tablet over there. That's that's rare in virtual reality. That's not a feature in a lot of apps, but Heaney has built it and it's amazing and I love it. But what Jerry showed me in that moment of leaning over to show me cards on this table in front of me was the AR equivalent of that. And right now with mixed reality and with AR anywhere else, that sort of effect is not great. Like cutting out the hand and recreating it, it looks terrible in all of that. I'm seeing actual light reflected from the room and from her hands merged with, blocking the images on the table in just a completely immersive, wonderful manner. Now, right now, this system is using a wand. Jerry told me that she was they're looking at object recognition. They're looking at hand tracking as, potential system incremental benefits to consider after this. But what I want to get across from this demo and from seeing from the story that I've laid out. Last year and over the last year, as we've been talking to Tilt 5 and reporting on them, they said that they were working on running multiple pairs of glasses from a single PC. That's what I saw at CES. They've been working towards delivering to their Kickstarter backers. They've done that. Now they're trying to catch up on pre-orders so that people can just come and order something and get it shipped to them and it'll arrive in a couple days. Right now there's a 4 to 6 week delay on orders. I believe it's toward the shorter end of that. But um, now I'm just going to say this is the best AR I've ever seen. Yeah, like it is the best AR I've ever seen. The field of view was fantastic. The fact that the lightness of these glasses, I think Ellsworth told me it was around 100 grams for this eye-worn system. They've pushed everything out of this into the rest of this system as possible. So you have the lightest weight thing on your head that I've felt. And the field of view, you sit just right, sit a foot back. The whole board is immersive. You can look down. I've been talking with Jerry. I'm going to try to do a stream with her at some point with Demio. Not on Tilt 5. I think I'm gonna try to play Demio with her over flat screen. And we'll set up some kind of a streaming where we can have an interview discussion while we're playing Demio, because Tilt 5 needs Demio. It needs games like Demio, and it is the perfect game. It's this game that's got depth to it, where you're like looking down onto a board that's built into a level and see little pieces moving down. It's just a match made in heaven. But Resolution Games needs to see it as a viable platform, and Tilt 5 needs it in the same way that Beat Saber was like necessary to the Quest platform.
So I think, the problem is that developers like Resolution are going to target where customers are. And I love the engineering behind Tilt 5. I love the idea of the use case, but there is one thing I don't love, and it's the price. The ideal use case for this is that you buy a pack of 3 or 4 glasses and play it as a family around a dining room table style scenario. The problem is that a 3 glasses pack is $960. If this thing was, $200 to $400, even $500, you could see this becoming a massive, massive mass market product that many, many people would adopt. But every $100 you go beyond that, you just start reducing the potential market smaller and smaller and smaller. And at $960 for a family pack, I just can't see a studio like Resolution Games investing their time for a market that size.
No, I think that's a totally fair analysis to make. What I think is also fair is to say you're asking too much of a system at this time, right? Like, so another part of my article that I wrote with about Tilt 5 was I reached out to Jerry and asked her some questions about the system and where she sees her company going, where she sees her platform going, uh, where she sees the troubles with Air, because that's why I want to do the Demio talk with her, because I'd like her just to speak very frankly about what she thinks about these things. Because uh, you know, one of the things I've cited on this show is I had talked to her about this idea of pass through AR, of mixed reality, and she basically told me it's going to be hard for that to be good for a very, very long time. And so far, all indications are that it's not going to it's going to take a lot to make pass through AR and a VR headset a really great experience. Um,
Does
I
that
you know
match what you saw with Vive XR Elite?
yeah, well, I'm going to wait until I want you to give me your analysis of the 3D reconstruction from the mixed reality, because 15 minutes in both was more or less what I would call my demo time, like actual mixed reality viewing. So you need to assess that over 2 hours, and I need to assess this over 2 hours, because that is ultimately what they're pitching as a platform. This is a game system that you might want to go and spend 2 hours around with family members. But actually doing that is an open question that we still have to, we have to get the hardware and test. And if, 2 hours in mixed reality on Vive XR Elite compared to this is what we need to answer at some point, like 2023, I think. We need to have that answer some point this year of which is
Yeah,
the better experience.
I think the real question for me is if Quest 3 comes out this year and it's somewhere between $300 and $400, and the mixed reality is actually better than Quest Pro, which, by all indications of the superior chip, seems like it'll be very, very likely. And say three Quest 3s comes in at just a couple of $100 more than this. That's the comparison I really want to see. What's a better experience? A game like Demio on this, or a game like Demio on Quest 3? And I expect this is going to be the answer because of that lightness and that field of view and the kind of ease of setup here compared to, doing that, setting up all that co-location. But if that also gives you all of the capabilities of VR as well, that's the value proposition people are going to be looking at. So, the question I really want to get from Jerry when you're interviewing her is, what is that future of cost reduction? How long does it take until this thing can be the same price as a games console for a family pack of 3 or 4 glasses? Because I really think if they can get to that price point, this is going to be enormous. But it just seems like it's too expensive for typical families at the moment.
Well, all right. So I agree with the typical families, but I also think there's an interesting argument to be made around the pair selling point. $660, I believe, is the price that Tilt 5 is offering right now for a pair of two of them. Um, that becomes more interesting than the 900 family pack. And also, I've thrown out this idea on Twitter that I'm personally obsessed with, that you take this board, you put it on a table, you mount it onto a table, you take a PC and mount it on the underside of the table. You have the wires for the 4 glasses coming out on each side of the table, and you preload it with 5 to 10 board games, chess, checkers, and then a whole bunch of games you could only have in augmented reality. You could even have like a wizard's chess type game bundled with a system like that. If you had that at a location like an arcade or a cafe, that's a pretty neat idea. And I think there's potentially a market for it that could be pretty significant. And that's beside the consumer market. So I personally would love to see if there's a market for that. I think it seems like a match made in heaven, and I don't like. It seems like a potentially like to your argument of whether the Quest 3 is lower priced and how much that squashes, like, comparatively how big a market this can achieve. What about like the business use cases that Magic Leap is going for with, well, you got to say a similar cost system, right? If you're thinking about a PC and 4 glasses, and a Magic Leap one for one person. Um, which is the bigger market of businesses, for the standalone headset that you wear a pack on your hip, or the cafes use case that I'm talking about here?
Yeah, that actually does seem like a really big potential use case. Cafes and locations like that, I'd love to see that happen. Yeah, when it comes to the total cost, I I don't really know the system requirements of this. Are you privy to that? Is this something that will run off a typical person's laptop, or is this something that does require a gaming PC for the typical content?
Well, you should probably talk to Jerry Ellsworth directly to push some hard questions to her. She seemed to give the indication that moderate level hardware can do a lot. The way they're doing reprojection or frame rate delivery on this is not the same flow as traditional VR devices. So I think, yes, you're probably going to need a powerful PC to do four glasses from one device. But I think we're getting right to the core of what would be really fascinating to see in their next incremental updates, right? This is a system that's coming together over years, and it needs the backing of investors to get to these stages where we could see, what happens if you get simple graphically games like I suggested here, running four glasses from a low cost PC. How much bigger of a market does that whole cafe use case get to? But yeah, it seemed like a not a super ultra gaming laptop that she was running from. It looked like a nice device, but not the beasts that I'm used to.
Yeah, it does seem promising. And, just to kind of talk against some of the comments I've been making here, many technologies start off as very expensive at the start and are used by a kind of core enthusiast base. For people who are very, very into certain tabletop games, this could be something that they very much so invest in, and they consider the price completely reasonable. And I do expect that this will sell well for its core audience. I'm just too eager to figure out the answer to that big question: what is the path to cost reduction over time for this?
Yeah, it is a really, really great question, and I didn't ask that one, right? Like I did dance around it and try to come at it in different ways, but it is a fundamental hard question of how do you get the next step. So in my story, she is quoted as saying there's multiple paths forward. She also talked about just I love this quote I got from her, where she basically said, if you're working in this business, and so this could be applicable to what Microsoft is doing, what Magic Leap is doing, what everyone in this space is doing. Um, you have to know where the limits are, and Tilt 5 is aware of the limits. So they're not like, what you're talking about is not unknown to them as a system, but it's still, I guess what I have to come back to is for everything you're saying, right, and we're trying to give the best most balanced view of what this technology is. I have to come back to this place of saying I think this is deserving of another round of investment to see it through to its next iteration, in a robust way. Give them this needs the support to see where it can get in another 18 months. And I would love to see it where, I was scratching my head at the billions raised by Magic Leap back when they raised it. I am not doing that with this technology. So I want to make sure that gets across to anyone out there who might be watching this.
Yeah, I think it's pretty inarguable to say that this will provide real, actual value long before true AR glasses are available to consumers at any kind of reasonable price. Even when the first AR glasses come out in a few years that are true AR glasses in the way that we all mean by that phrasing, they're going to cost a lot more than these per unit, and they're going to be a lot more limited, especially when it comes to field of view. And yes, obviously, they're not just restricted to a tabletop format, but that is the advantage of this product, that, as you say, Ellsworth and the Tilt 5 team are aware that it's not possible to build those science fiction AR glasses today, but you can build something like this that works within the constraints of today's technology figures out what would actually deliver a lot of fun and value and entertainment to real consumers, and then kind of dive into that in a kind of deep way that isn't wide but is very focused and narrow. And yeah, as you say, I'm really, really interested to see what does the second generation of this product look like and how long does that take to emerge.
Yeah, so I think that covers our planned discussion here. If there's any last questions to get into before we close out, and comments, we might cover those for a minute. I just I've said it already in this show, but I want to reiterate that it was fairly significant that they delivered on Kickstarter. They had the consumer packaging. She pulled out two glasses from the box, hooked them up to a laptop, and we had this multiplayer AR experience. And it just worked. Like, that's unheard of, and it felt wonderful. Like, the glasses on my head felt wonderful. The field of view felt wonderful. Input, everything was great. And the fact that she's just, she's mobile, bringing this kit around, and was able to make that work in the 2 minutes it took to set up right in front of me is a testament to the readiness of the platform in its current iteration. So kudos to Tilt 5 for being, getting to this point. And I hope to see, I hope to get into more with Jerry Ellsworth in the months to come.
Yeah, your impressions of the software here are very promising because when it comes to this product, we've obviously been talking about the hardware, or at least I've been talking a lot about the hardware, but the friction of the software and how simple it is to go from, okay, we as a family or as a couple or a pair or whoever want to play this game with this system to actually being in the game, how long that takes is such a huge factor. And we talk about this all the time for VR, and how complex it can be to actually get into a game. That's very promising because that is going to be a selling point of a system like this. If it is as quick or quicker to set up than a real board game. And it's something that if it was done wrong could certainly kill a product like this. If it was this complicated, hassly setup process that took, 10 minutes and constant restarting of devices, that wouldn't be promising at all. One comment I want to point out here, D1360VR, just kind of noting what you noted at the start, that this was almost abandoned in a Valve warehouse. And that has me wondering, how many other really interesting products or technologies are abandoned in certain tech companies' research and development labs? How many ideas that could have been great had you just had one person with a vision take it all the way are never going to see the light of day? I really wonder that.
Yeah, it's like the Raiders of the Lost Ark of consumer technology, warehouses where all the good ideas go to die. And I do uh, that's one of the things. Maybe I'll put Jerry on the spot if we do the Demio interview, to share some of these stories of how this stuff got brought out. There is a video on our channel. I think it's on the Trailers channel. If you Google search Jerry Ellsworth fired Valve, there is a video where she recaps kind of the exit from Valve, where she was fired, but she also bought the technology. And it's not just buying the technology; she was sold the technology. The head of Valve, Gabe Newell, agreed to let her take this technology out of Valve, and here it is a decade later as this consumer platform. Remarkable story there. And there's still, we didn't get into it very much. I mentioned it briefly, but that this story running parallel to the Oculus story is interesting to me. She is a contemporary of Palmer Luckey going and doing the Oculus project, and she's at Valve during the time when those people who went from Valve to Oculus did that jump. And that's still a murky era of history. We still don't know how the people inside Valve felt about the departures over to Oculus. It wasn't covered in some of the earliest stories here. So it is something that she has a unique perspective on. And as I understand it, didn't sign the non-disclosure agreement on exit from Valve. So that ends up being, making her a very limited number of people who can speak about what that experience was actually like. So we hope that we have presented what Tilt 5 is doing fairly. We hope we get a chance to have this story on our site in the future. yeah, Stephanie saying that she didn't sign the NDA, which uh, I can't. I give anybody that doesn't sign that NDA is it gets a kudos in my book, right? If you're able to stand on the principle that your experience is being able to talk publicly about your experience is more important than whatever amount they're giving you. That's a significant thing in my head, and definitely something important about the story.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting in your article where you kind of talked about and speculated and mused upon the very different paths of Ellsworth and Lucky, and what the relative advantages are to going alone and versus kind of being bought out by a big company. And without a crystal ball, no one can really know which path kind of worked out best and how the VR market would have looked had, say, Lucky kept Oculus independent and not sold out to Facebook. These are all just huge questions that end up shaping the entire industry.
Yep, yep. There's The History of the Future is the book by Blake Harris, and I always think about the alternate futures, right, that we could have had, and were there discussions that had they gone different ways, could we have arrived with a very different lay of the land for VR and AR? Um, any comments that we want to respond to? I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in this week. Guy Godin, our new members. Sadly, it's Bradley, Paradise Decay, Onakazi, all our regular viewers. We didn't go 2 hours this week. That was a little bit of a relief. Those were intense the last few weeks, so that's nice.
Yeah, like I said at the start, a little bit of a lighter news week than this, but I'm sure the VR news will jump back up next week as usual. I think there's just so much coming around CES and around the end of the year that there just couldn't be as much the next week.
Well,
Just seeing some of the commenters saying they're pretty drunk now. Thanks, Ian. You've sent some of them into a drunken spiral.
Well, I was gonna, yeah, that was gonna my note. I was gonna leave them off on. Should we title next week's episode PSVR on PC, Heaney and Ian debate, and you guys can all finish off on a couple drinks there after that one.
Yeah, I think I kind of didn't want to talk about that today because we've just done it to death on this show, and everything that was in that article we've talked about so many times. But yeah, if it's a slow news week, I'm up for it. But if it's not, let's focus on whatever the news really is.
Absolutely. All right. Totally fair. Send us big VR news if you don't want us to talk about the elephant in the room that everyone is talking about in the VR market. And yeah, we'll have that fight openly. It was fun editing Heaney's piece. If you haven't, go check it out on UploadVR.com. Heaney's assessment of the likelihood of that. And yeah, Walkabout Golf Tournament, Stephanie. I'm totally game. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do it. I will say I have been continuing my tours of Walkabout Mini Golf with the head of the company over there. I'm going to try to complete the full set over time of every Walkabout Mini Golf because it absolutely does. As I've been doing these tours, I've been getting insight into the process of development and building up that much, building up from very simple game concept to a very layered experience with multiple modes, DLC that spans licensed and original content, and the challenges of growing a team alongside that and bringing in really talented people to help you build out that vision. It's ending up being like a master's course in just kind of like VR design. And I've got that playlist over on the UploadVR channel of different walkabout courses, but I've got a couple lined up, I think 3 of them, and Atlantis is coming next, so I can't wait to see that. So yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to do a golf tournament at some point. Yes, 2 Heenies in a single sentence. On that note, let's sign off. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the future, and thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everyone. Sorry for your sobriety or lack thereof.